You are listening to the new man, beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Are you waiting to get your confidence up before trying something scary? Do you feel like you need to hide your fears from yourself and the world? And how does avoiding risk zap your energy and kill your enjoyment for life? Big wave world champion surfer Greg Long nearly drowned and then went Christmas shopping the very next day. While his body may have recovered quickly, his fears and confusion about living took a far greater toll. Welcome to The New Man. Today we're talking with Greg Long. He is the current big wave world champion. Greg, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tripp. It's an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, well, we're going to have some fun today, but we're also going to talk about some very, very serious stuff. We're going to talk about how you almost died. We're going to talk about how that's impacted how you live now. And for the guy listening, for the guy that's like on a treadmill in Chicago, let's help him see his own thoughts and fears from a different perspective, because I've read some of the things you've been writing and sharing about this experience over the last year or so, and I think anybody can gain so much from it. So, but let's just dive in. I mean, tell us what happened to you on December 21st, 2012.
I guess before we get to that, in a nutshell, my passion has been riding big waves since I was about 14 years old. That's what I've dedicated my life to. It's my life's work, my passion. And, it's been a global pursuit, ever since then for me, from about 18 until now. I'm 30 years old.
And I don't think guys really get what you put into it. You're traveling pretty much year round, following the biggest storms and the biggest waves out there. This isn't just Jeff Spicoli and his stoner buddies, hopping in a van and going down to Baja.
Exactly. It's big wave surfer, a professional big wave surfer is essentially doing that. 12 months of the year, tracking the most significant storm events, in the oceans around the globe, and at the drop of a hat, basically, traveling and then going to these different breaks that we know of, and then trying to find new ones to ride the biggest, possible waves in the world. So there's it's a life's work of, physical preparation, mental preparation, and just ensuring that, you're in top, peak form every single one of these, sessions comes about, because there's, serious consequences, as I came to find out on December, 21st last year, where it was a perfect storm of a situation. I wiped out on a wave and essentially drowned. That's the short Cliff Notes version of it. And I've known the risks and the consequences of being out there. I've lost very close friends in this pursuit of riding big waves in the past. And I've had a couple close calls as well myself, but what I experienced that day and what I went through, was beyond anything that I'd really ever imagined.
You're one of the more prepared guys that you have a lifeguarding background. Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up. My father was a lifeguard, so from the youngest of age, we were instilled with, the real, detailed, I guess, respect for the ocean and approaching it from a safety standpoint, that, you're minimizing the risks that you're taking before you go out there. And that's something I've applied to every single, endeavor in my life, when it comes to, dealing with the ocean, whether it's, diving, surfing, swimming, and especially big wave surfing, because there are, significant risks to it, as I was speaking of earlier. And the possibility that you could go out there and drown is very real. It's happened to a number of our friends before, and we've all had close calls. So before going out there, essentially what you want to do is eliminate all of the controllable variables, which is your physical preparation, your mental preparation, the equipment, the safety that you have in place. So if something does go wrong, everything that's you can, actually control to help you, remedy whatever situation it is, it's there and it's in place. And then I guess one of the key factors to the success, in my big wave surfing career, and what ultimately led to my life being saved that day at Cortes Bank.
Yeah, so you weren't being reckless. You brought your own safety crew. This wasn't just like, hey, let's go have some fun. You are so known for your preparation and actually pushing the sport forward in this way. And even then, even with all of this preparation, the uncertainty is still there. The risk is still there, and you still almost lost your life. Describe what a 2 or 3 wave hold down is.
In big wave surfing, when you fall on a wave, you're dealing with such an intense amount of water. Everyone knows how strong and powerful the ocean is. So when you're putting yourself, out there, when it's at its, biggest, wildest states, waves in excess of, 40, 50, 60 feet on the face, you're dealing with volumes of water that you have no physical control over what happens when you fall. It's a matter of, what the ocean is going to do, to you. And that usually entails, being held down a very long time and, your body being, torn, just this ragdoll motion of, appendages flying every single which way. And sometimes the hold downs are so long that you won't actually get back to the surface before a second wave will wash over you. And that's what we call a 2-wave hold down. And those are actually commonplace in big wave surfing, something that anyone who's been doing it for a significant amount of time has dealt with, a 2-wave hold down. That day at Cortes, what I actually experienced was a 3-wave hold down, and I blacked out right before getting to the surface after the 3rd wave, and then a 4th wave came over me. But in between those two, I actually, swimming for the surface after the 1st wave, I had the 2nd wave knock all the wind out of me, which is really what took, what probably, something I could have survived and, turned it into, the grave situation, which, led to me being, pulled out of the water, essentially lifeless by my rescue team.
So let's go through this. So you're climbing your leash back up to the surface, and you hear the wave coming, and you get that 2nd wave knocks the air out of you, and you're climbing up the 3rd time for the 3rd wave that's coming. Your body's convulsing. What's going through your mind there as you are talking to yourself and telling yourself not to take a breath? Because if you let your body take over, you're going to die.
Right. I went down on the 1st wave, and that wave pushes me so deep and holds me down for so long. I'm actually contemplating, do I just relax? That's the key to surviving a big wipeout, is you have to relax. If you struggle, if you panic, if you start fighting, you're going to be burning up, the oxygen, the energy that you have, and you're not going to be able to, stay under the water as long as you need to. So it's all about, controlling the mind and relaxing. And I'm down there for so long after the 1st wave that, I start to think, okay, the 2nd one has to be coming any second now. Do you stay down here, or do you actually, swim for the surface and try and get that breath? And I decided to, make a break for the surface, and it was about, 6 or 7, really big strokes up to the surface. And as I'm getting close, the 2nd wave actually lands right on top of me and knocks all the wind out of me before I'm able to get up there and get that breath. So I'm pushed right back down to where I was, probably 15 seconds before, only this time, everyone knows that feeling when you have the wind knocked out of you. There's just this insatiable desire to, take that next breath of air and reinflate the lungs. But I know if I do that, that's it for me, because I still have a long time, being this deep under the water before I'm ever going to be able to get to the surface. And if I breathe and inhale, inflate my lungs, flood my lungs essentially with water, that's the end of the game. So it became a total game of mind control. That I've been in really bad situations before in big waves where I'm thinking, okay, I'm running out of air, I need to get to the surface, but never one that was so intense as this, that instantly my body's convulsing, just begging me to, inflate my lungs, but I know I can't. And the only way that I was able to hang on as long as I did was I simply did not even admit to myself that I actually need to do this. It was just this repetitive mantra in my head of, I'm okay. I'm going to get to the surface. Just relax. And it's amazing through the, training that I've gone through over the years of learning to hold my breath extended periods of time, knowing, what's actually happening, physiologically, inside of me that, even when you don't have any air, that your bloodstream is still so saturated with oxygen that you can hang on a long time before you'll black out. It's just a matter of overcoming, that physical sensation that your body's, kind of just checking in with you, telling you, hey, you need to breathe, you're running out of air. But you're able to overcome that. And that was, knowledge that came through, years of training and preparation. But the hardest thing in this world is, this mind, this mental chatterbox that will, even though you better, in so many situations, if you take a second to slow down and mindfully, process, what's happening around you, you still have this ego and chatterbox saying, no, you have to do this, you have to do this. Well, it's not in your best interest. So when you're able to overcome that mentally, and you open up a whole new world of potential, as I did down there, of just simply, knowing, that I can hang on longer than what my body's physically telling me to. I'm just, mentally, believe that, go into that space where you're not questioning yourself. And so I get to hang on for a bit. After the second wave, actually pushed me back down, I was so deep that I didn't even have a chance to swim to the surface before the third wave came over. And big wave surfing, as we've pulled down, isn't really been heard of before.
Yeah.
That's usually what results in, the drowning. In most cases, with a few of our friends and other situations, we haven't been able to get to them in time. So I end up actually climbing my leaf hand over fist for the surface. And I fight my way all the way up, and my body at this point has just is going into the full seizure convulsions, and extremities are starting to tingle, body's. I know at that point I'm getting very close to blacking out. And it was right before I got to the surface. I did lose consciousness that I never got up to there before under my own power. But all the while at the surface, I had, a rescue team in place, and they were following, tracking my board, which is, still attached to my leash, attached to my leg. The entire time they knew exactly where I was, and, knew that I never actually made it to the surface. So at that point I had, 3 different, jet ski operators, following my every single move. And, the fourth wave washes over me, and we're surfing at this place called the Cortes Bank. It's an underwater seamount 100 miles off the coast of California here, Southern California. There's no landmass in sight, and the very inside of this wave, it's just this tumultuous array of churning water and foam and waves coming in every single direction. It's a terrible place that you don't want to be in, and that's where you go after a series of wipeouts and or a series of successive waves. And so my team's following my board, and they know it's something serious is happening here. And after the fourth wave washed over me, I get pushed way inside to where they thought that I would have come up, and it takes them a few minutes to track down where my board is. And, because I made it so close to the surface, under my own power, I floated up relatively quick. And they saw, that I was lifeless. I was unconscious and floating face down in the water. One of them rushes in, actually dives off the ski, bear hugs me through another wave. And then the other 2 rescue operators come around and help extract my body out of the water onto, we have these rescue sleds on the back of the skis, and then transport me back to the main boat. So it was one of those, had they not been there, that was it. I had drowned, and that was the end of this life as I knew it. So, but fortunately, they did get to me in time. And there's a kind of whole series of, again, biological, physiological reactions that your body goes through when it blacks out or loses consciousness in water that led to me being saved. And one of them is called a larynx spasm reflex. When you lose consciousness in water, is if you don't give up and take that breath and flood your lungs with water, your throat muscles and face muscles will constrict. And at that time, the last of the oxygen in your bloodstream is drawn up to your brain to preserve it. And this reflex, it'll hang on until the very last moment, until all that oxygen's been used up, and at which point the muscles will release, and you'll take that breath. And if you're still in water, then you enter a whole world of an emergency resuscitation, getting water from the lungs, and a whole new world of complications. But they got to me before that actually happened. So I had checked out. I wasn't conscious, and it was about 5 minutes before I actually came back. To when I was on the boat.
Yeah.
But they never actually had to give me CPR. My heart had basically slowed to a complete stop. And they got me back there, and they were checking for a pulse for a long time. Actually, I didn't have a readable pulse, but I was actually starting to move and still subtly breathing. So about as close as you come to drowning and dying and coming back and being able to come back and play the game again.
Yeah. Well, I'm just stupefied. I don't know what to say. So you talked about the physiological, you talked about the biological part. Most of us, we think about death, but we're really most afraid of dying. And you got to experience what could have been your death consciously. What was going on in your mind? I mean, were you just so focused on don't breathe, you're fine, telling yourself that, or were other things going through your mind there? Because you knew as you were counting waves that you were up shit creek. So what was going through your mind there, and what was happening for you emotionally?
At that point, I knew how serious the situation is, and I wasn't even going to. I didn't even allow myself to question, where I was. Start to think about, okay, I'm going to drown here, thinking about my friends. And the reason for that is simple, that I knew how serious the situation was, and that, my life was, seriously compromised at this point in time. And those thoughts, that's wasted energy. When you're down there, anything that wasn't going to be constructive to me getting to the surface, which is where I needed to be, I wasn't even going to give an ounce of my energy, even as subtle as it is, that mental thought of, what about, my family,
Yeah.
It didn't come into the picture. There'll be plenty of time to contemplate that after you die. And that I'm sure of. In that moment, all I needed, could do was relax and just pay so close attention to. It was weird. It's like one foot was in the game of, okay, I need to, stay present and fight and get to the surface. But the other part had, essentially removed itself from, the physical stress that I was under, that duress, that, insatiable desire to breathe, and, the body convulsing, because it's the most agonizing feeling in the world. Anybody who knows, what that's like when they're holding their breath and you start getting those diaphragm contractions. And I was at such an extreme state of that for so long. I couldn't actually really be entirely present in that physical body. So I had, through sort of practice meditation, in a way, checked out from that, but all the while keeping, once in, the reality of what I needed to do to get from, point A to point B to the surface to get that breath. So, it was just total focus, concentration on that task at hand, but almost from a distance. So it is like nothing I'd ever had experienced before, or I always knew I was capable of it, but it was kind of one of those situations, until your life's, actually on the line, you hear these stories of people who have superhuman strength of lifting cars off people, and, in moments when they need to. It's almost one of those, as cliche as it is, like, I found, my greatest, mental potential at the time that, I needed it most, because I had no other choice, and I wasn't going to give up down there.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So in that moment, the emotional, all the story kind of stuff went away. You just stayed focused on the task at hand, which was to not breathe, which was to get to the surface. When did so they fly you back, they airlift you back because you're 100 miles offshore. The Coast Guard comes out and gets you and takes you back in. When did it start to hit you, or how did it start to hit you, the enormity of what happened, that you almost lost your life?
It hit me as soon as I regained consciousness on the boat. So they got me back to the main support boat. I'm there on the back swim step for a minute or two. They can see that I'm subtly breathing, and I'm there. And then all of a sudden, like that, the lights come back on, and there was a very euphoric, spiritual sort of journey that happened between that time of losing consciousness there, which is a story for a whole other time. But as soon as
you were having an experience while you were unconscious. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it was beyond words, and again, it'll be a whole nother hour long discussion we'll have at some point down the road. But
okay, can I get your word on that?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely,
good.
So I regained consciousness, and I just started vomiting blood. Coughing up blood and foamy, little bit of water that I had at some point aspirated, but it wasn't, the full, lungs, fluid purging of the water. And, the blood was coming from, ruptured internal capillaries due to the, stress of holding the breath, and there's another, biological explanation of what happened internally. But, I'm struggling to breathe. Every exhale's, blood, every single inhale, it's just kind of, a little bit of oxygen. And it was the worst physical sensation I'd ever been through. Broken bones and had all sorts of injuries, but this was happening. It was horrendous, but I was there and alone. And I knew instantly what had happened. First thing I did was ask, who got to me first, which was actually, one of my really good friends from Hawaii who we'd specifically flown out, to do rescues with DK Walsh. And in those moments, just this rush of emotion, when you come that close to losing your life and can sit here and think about, how lucky you are to still be here. And it was difficult because I guess really at that point, my one goal was to just focus on breathing and really just relax. The Coast Guard's flown out 100 miles. They're actually on another call, and so it took them about 6 hours to get there. So I'm on the back of the boat, actually inside the boat at this point in time, hooked up to oxygen, and just, trying not to move, just to relax. And, I'm thinking about my life, everything that led me to that point. Just the looks on my, friends of concern and love, on my friends' faces. My brother was right there. Thinking about, I listened to him call my family from the satellite phone and basically said, Dad, Greg drowned. They got to him in time. He's, still coughing up a lot of blood. We don't know if he's, punctured a lung or what sort of internal injuries he has. Coast Guard's coming to fly him home. And in those moments, you're just like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, this is my life's like work and passion has led me to this point of putting all of my friends and my family through, just, such a heavy emotional, situation. And all for what, really?
It sounds like was it like an anger or a frustration or like a sense of betrayal? How would you describe that?
It was really it was total confusion. I mean, because I get asked that all the time, like, why do you actually ride big waves? You've lost, your best friend doing it, one of your best friends doing it. There's been other people who've drowned doing it. It's so selfish of you that, you go out here and you do this, and it's, for your satisfaction. Let you know that there's people that, love and care about you, and you've got family and friends. And, those are common things that, people ask me, like, do you just not care about, the rest of life, that you're going to take these risks? And I'd always had an answer for it. And it still holds true, is that, you have to be doing what you love in this world, what drives you, where you feel alive. And a big part of that, under different contexts for different people, is taking risks and challenging yourself. That's our purpose here, in this life as human beings, to continually push and challenge ourselves, to grow physically, mentally, and spiritually. And big wave surfing became my means of doing that. That, in a way, it was almost as if I was, and I do think this often, something, I was born into this life and meant to do this, that I wouldn't have had all the opportunities leading me to having the comfort that I do in the ocean and, being exposed to riding big waves if I wasn't meant to do it. And it became my arena for challenging myself to find out what I'm physically capable of, and more importantly, what I'm mentally. In those moments out there, it's complete and total concentration, and you're dealing with, so many fear-inducing situations, that when you're able to, understand those emotions that come about from, those events in the ocean, and how to control that fear, not let it, take control of your life, but actually use it as a means of motivating you. You take that, I've taken what I've learned from the ocean and applied it into every single other aspect of my life. And, it's been one of the single greatest features for me.
Right.
And it's always why I knew, why I was doing it. And, yes, there's risks involved and there's dangers involved, but, live your life, worrying about those, and as we were spoken earlier, you're able to manage the risks that we take out there to where, you're doing something that, yes, is risky, is dangerous, but you're doing it in a way that you're managing the risks, and it's not, I guess, doing something risky in an unrisky way. And I love doing it to where I feel alive. So that was always why I knew it, and, why I eventually went back and I'm doing it again, although it took me a long time to get back to that place of actually enjoying, being in the ocean, riding big waves, and having the confidence to do it. And I'm still not even close to, having that same mindset that I did, prior to that accident.
What's shifted for you? Because you've talked a bit about in other areas where I've been reading and following you through this. There was the event that happened on that day. You recovered physically rather, relatively quickly, but then there's been this road of coming back mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And you talk about this doubt. I can imagine the guy that's out there listening, like, well, I've stepped off this path of safety and certainty, and now I'm in the unknown. I'm following my passion. I'm following a life of purpose, and shit, it's hard. Like, it's confusing because it seems like it should, like, isn't it supposed to be the Yellow Brick Road? And it's supposed to just kind of lead me on its way, and this almost killed you. And it's like, wait a second, how does this work here? I'm following my passion. It seems like we're kind of expecting that things would open up at that point, and we could lose our lives doing the things that we love. So I can imagine, I don't know, was that confusing for you? I mean, kind of walk us through how you were putting the pieces back together this last year.
Absolutely. So I was airlifted from Cortes Bank to the hospital. I spent the whole night in the hospital, just CAT scans, X-rays, everything. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I walk out of there the next morning.
Wow.
I walk out of there and I go home and I get in my car and I go do my Christmas shopping.
Oh my God! Like 24 hours later, you're out Christmas shopping.
Literally 24 hours later, I hadn't done the Christmas shopping because I was so focused on the swells and traveling and all the rest. And I'm walking around the freaking mall, just going, so this is life, huh? Like, I
could be in a box right now. I should be in a bag right now.
Exactly. Like 2 years, less than 24 hours ago, I was, it didn't make sense to me. Like, there's so many questions, that then go through your mind of like how and why, and you essentially became the observer of just life in general. And I was always, very attentive to, and mindful of my surroundings, but even more so now in those moments. And it actually took a while for it all to settle in. It was almost just processing all this over and over and over again I speak of it as if I'm done doing it, but I'm not. I still am. But to kind of lay out the sequence of events, less than a month later, there's one of the prominent big wave contests up at Mavericks in Northern California. So I got home feeling good every single day, started, training again, really kind of strengthening my lungs. They'd been through a lot of kind of physical trauma. So there was a bit of work to do there. And, a month later, I paddled back out to, this contest at Mavericks, big wave contest, and I ended up getting third in. And then, I surfed another one up in Oregon like a week later, and I got second in that one. And I never actually like slowed down for a second to think, about what was happening. But I went back out there, and I went through the motions of riding big waves. But I'll tell you, I was so fearful. I didn't want to be there. The second that I touched the water, it just felt so foreign, and like this place I didn't want to go back to. That everything that my life had been built upon, had been pulled from underneath my feet. That I went through those contests, and I feel like, and I know it was only because it was a contest, people watching, my ego, you have to do this, that I was actually able to, paddle into those waves. Because after those two events, and having that, I guess, extra pressure of like, you have to do this, you have to perform, my confidence was gone. The next session after that, I paddled out in, where there was no, pressure of performing, doing anything. I sat out the back and, beyond, the lineup of where everyone was sitting, another, 10, 15 yards, which is kind of what I do sometimes, sort of waiting for the biggest waves. But,
yeah.
I sat there and I didn't even want to paddle for a wave. That I didn't want to catch a wave, and I didn't want to be there. Yet here I was putting myself out there because that's what I do. Was it like the gym coach or the football coach we had growing up that was like, just rub some dirt on it and get out there? Or, was this part of you like, I just need to fight through this and do this? Or was it, you mentioned ego a little bit ago, but really what were you doing sitting on your board out there? That was all I knew. That my life, had been 100% dedicated to big wave surfing. That it was my love, passion, my one road that I knew and always felt that I was meant to walk down, and that's what I had done. You ask any one of my friends, probably the most intense, dedicated, driven of anybody to be riding, these swells around the world, to be everywhere, every single possible time, and catching the biggest waves. So that's what I did.
And so who am I? Who am I if I'm not riding big waves? Is that the question? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And
which I can imagine for some guys out there, like, just to put it back into perspective, like these guys lose their job, or they get to the end of where they feel they are in some career or whatever, but that's what they're up against, is like, well, shit, who am I if I'm not married to this woman? Who am I if I don't have this girlfriend? Who am I if I don't have this job or this career? And we'd rather stay in that shitball place where we don't feel great, we don't feel like we're ourselves, than step into that next phase of uncertainty. Does that resonate for you? Yeah.
That's exactly it. And so I, tried to get back on that horse that I'd ridden for so long, and I was out there, and I had zero confidence, and there was no love for it at that point. And that was the hardest thing for me to come to terms with, because that's what it was all about, from the very beginning, and how I even got into this, because I enjoyed it so much. So, I started questioning, who I was, what I was doing, why was I out there? And that lack of confidence that I'd always had, it was gone. And that started to permeate into every other aspect of my life. I was in a relationship at the time. I just became this sort of, in a way, almost sort of depressed person that, ended up, separating. That girl, broke up with me because I wasn't, that happy-go-lucky, person anymore. And I started to struggle. And the worst part is that it was an internal struggle with myself, that I wasn't going to let the world around me know what I was going through, because of, that ego of, I can't, outright admit that I'm having a hard time, that I question if I can go back and surf big waves, because that's what I get, that's my job. That's what everyone knows me, to be, this, great big wave surfer, inspirational figure. And what if all of a sudden I say I can't do it anymore? Like, then what's going to happen to my career, to people's perception of me? And that's the worst thing in the world, Tripp, is when you aren't truthful, number one, to yourself, and then, to the rest of the world. If you're not speaking and living your truth exactly how you feel, and you're just bottling it up and keeping it inside of you, that, having gone through that absolutely sucks.
Well, it's just amazing to put this in perspective, because you just described a few minutes ago your almost literal death, and now we're talking about the ego death here, and how the ego is just clawing and holding on here, and it's miserable. Like, it's just like, I don't know. I'm just get these two, and you're describing this one even as painful as, if not more. It's because it's drawn out.
It is, because you're defeating, that fundamental purpose of, growing. And you're never going to do that if you're living in this, confined place of being able to go beyond. I mean, what I came to learn, that everything around us, and I'd always known it, but again, it's this ego thing is what, and I'll say it time and again, that keeps you from, actually living, these truths that we know inside of us. But,
what do you mean by that? Wait, that was big. Go back to that. What is that? What do you mean by that? The ego is what keeps us from what?
We know, from really, expanding and growing beyond in these, diverse or abstract situations that we're put in, that the world, it's always changing every single moment around us. And, you have to be able to adapt and grow and go with the flow, and simply accept that everything that's happening is, for a reason. And, that reason is for that personal, mental, physical, spiritual growth that we talked about earlier. And rather than fighting it and rejecting it and living in the state of denial, whatever it is, you've got to just embrace it with open arms and be able to, accept everything that's happening, for the lesson that it's there to teach you. And sometimes it's, obvious straight away, and other times you won't realize it down the road. But just simply being okay and being able to adapt and go with the flow of life. And
what would that have looked like for you at that time? Just embracing, like, okay, I'm depressed, I'm lost, I don't have it figured out right now, and I don't have to be Greg Long. Would that have been like a version of being okay with it?
Simply put, yeah. Of, telling my sponsors, hey guys, I need to take some time off and really, reflect on my life and what big wave surfing means to me right now, because right now I'm not enjoying it, and I don't feel good when I'm out there doing it. Yet here I am, still going to every single swell around the world, with my friends, pretending like I am, trying to fight to, get that confidence back. Meanwhile, I'm not having fun, and the more I was fighting and struggling, and in a way, just that's not the way to get through life, and especially sensitive situations like that, to fight your way back. And so I was going, and it got to a point where I didn't have the energy to go anymore. I was fighting, and eventually I was just exhausted, emotionally, physically. And
yeah.
so yeah, literally just admitting where you're at, that nothing is ever going to change until you openly accept, the situation, the circumstances around you. So
and I can imagine for the guy. Well, I was going to say, I just want to dovetail, like, for that guy that's listening right now, that if we're trying to avoid looking like we're weak, because that's really what it comes down to. I don't want to appear weak. I don't want to appear less than. I've got to kind of portray myself as a guy that's got it together. That the real move there towards strength is admitting where we are instead of posturing that we're not going through this or that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's such a big point. That's actually the strength. Yeah.
That's it exactly. And the reality is, that's again our ego, our worrying of about looking vulnerable or weak. That's the greatest bunch of bullshit in the world.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. The only thing that matters is your perception of reality. Everyone is going through a world of circumstances that's led them to seeing, thinking, perceiving the world from their unique point of view. And people may judge, or they may see things completely different than you. It does not matter. That the only thing that matters is what's inside of you, and that happiness. And then eventually being able to share that with the rest of the world. So this fear of being judged by others, it's fucking bullshit. That's one thing that I laugh at now, and I laugh at myself of going there like, why would you actually care, Greg? If somebody was like, oh, Greg's quitting, he's giving up, he can't do this anymore. Why does it matter? If someone else who's reading one of my stories from across the other side of the world, or someone who was my biggest fan, because I was such a good big wave surfer, is now I think less of me because I can't do it anymore. Why does it matter?
Yeah.
It doesn't to me, because what matters is my happiness and me being fulfilled. Because until you have that, you can't actually give that away and share that with other people in this world. So and that's part of life is being vulnerable. It's something I've actually come to love and enjoy since this whole experience. That's when you're really being forced to slow down and reflect and question where you're at, and you find that real growth. It's kind of like
there's this, like, I always think of it like this, like a video game. Like the first phase of the video game is the shit we learn on the playground growing up. Like, we got to posture, we got to puff ourselves up. You can't be a pussy, that whole thing. And then we realize, like, we hit a wall with that at some point. Like, well, wait a second, this only takes us so far, and that it's like the whole thing flips at some point. Like like we've reached the end of that level, and we know we've reached the end of that level whenever we're exhausted. Whenever things don't make sense anymore, things that used to work don't work anymore, and life seems to be really fucking hard now. And then it's like, oh, well, if I'm willing to step into that fear, if I'm willing to step into that vulnerability, that takes real strength. Wait, that's everything I've been said not to do, but that's where life starts to open up again. It seems to flip and go into this whole new direction. But it sounds like that's where you found your life again, was when you were willing to step into that vulnerability and be honest.
Exactly. I mean, and it literally came with, for me, that pivotal moment, I'd been just in my head so long, and, a very, specific few close people, my closest friends and family actually knew what I was going, through. And it wasn't until I literally wrote, a story, the whole story in an international, publication to the world of like, yeah, this is what I went through, and this is what, what I was feeling. And I didn't want to, and I still do question whether or not, I actually want to continue this pursuit of big waves. And in that moment, I felt liberated from all those, constricting emotions that I was holding on to, that I stepped into this world of freedom. I'm like, okay, like, you put yourself out there, you just walk through those doors, and now the world of opportunity is before you to do whatever you want, because you've let go of that attachment to, your past. And, there's the analogy that you can't actually, you can't hold on, or I'm sorry, you can't bring anything else or hold anything else, new in your life if you're just, clutching to all those things and pieces in the past.
Yeah.
You have to be able to let go of something in one hand in order to bring in, something entirely, new. And I, in that moment, I felt like the world of, expectation, all this stuff, had been lifted, and I instantaneously just felt lighter and happier. And it was like, all right, like, so you went through all of that, and you may not pick up where you left off ever, or go back to that confidence ever again in big wave surfing, and it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, I just want to point out that the freedom you got didn't come from you coming to this new place and then like, hey, I've arrived at this new place and now I've got it all figured out and it's all perfect now. It was the freedom came from just like, I'm scared and I'm not sure where things are going, and then you felt free.
Exactly. I mean, before I even like had my feet back on the ground and a direction of, where I was going again, it was literally just opening up my arms to the world and saying, yeah, bring it, whatever it is, what's happened in the past, that's led me to being here and now with a world of knowledge and opportunity and experience. And, there's been a serious, twist to the whole plot of this, game of life, this story, and, roll with it, because that's all you can do. You sit here and you try and, I spoke earlier of, life constantly evolving and changing. You can stay stuck in that, in the past, the old story, what's happened, but it's going to change, and it's going to keep twisting and turning and going in different directions. And you need to be able to just adapt and move with it, to what feels good in that moment in time. And often it takes, some time to figure out what you want to be doing next in life. And that's where, the scary moments is the uncertainty that, people, we've been taught to have this sense of, direction, or, comfort or stability in life, that we know, where our financial income's coming from, that we've got a house and just, the world's solid around us. We've got cars and all the rest of it that, there's elements of, reality that, those things, do, add to the comfort of our life, and we can enjoy them and enhance our happiness, I guess, but it's not what makes, the foundation of who we are in the most important elements of life, which is, that's, love and true happiness. That's, that comes from within you, not from without these peripheral materialistic possessions and things. So, I sat there and I worried about my career, and, was I still going to get paid to travel and, this dream job of being a professional surfer? And,
right.
But I would have gladly at any one of those moments given up, that financial stability and that job of a professional surfer if it meant that I could be, fulfilled and happy inside again. And, if I didn't want to go back out and surf big waves again, I wasn't going to force myself, to doing that, just, to keep a job, because I wasn't going to be happy doing it. Why are you going to do it? You're defeating the fundamental, purpose, one of the fundamental purposes of living, and that's to find joy and happiness.
Beautiful. You talk about thought control earlier on. It saved your life. And then it sounds like it's also the thing that if we are trying to control ourselves, and I want to say, we're playing defense here. We're playing defense about what we could lose, how people could see us, the thing that we see, we don't want to see ourselves a certain way. And so it's like this, playing defense in our lives instead of staying curious. But it's all in our head. So it's just a matter of, watching when it's time to have that kind of constricting thought. At one point, it actually saved your life literally, but it was also the thing that was whether you realized it or not, it was the thing that was stifling you and definitely killing your vitality and energy. Um, so you've been in this place, you've been more curious, and then you ended up going back out to Cortes Bank a year or so later after you drowned out there. So, what drew you to come back? Was that ego again? What was that about?
Yeah, I mean, there was still, I thought about it. Why would I want to go back out there? And all the while, once I did, admit to the world that I question whether or not I still enjoy doing this if I want to. I continued to do it, but under my own under my rules. There wasn't this. I wasn't doing it because I was feeling expected to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it because, again, I wanted to explore that, those ideas and concepts of fear, and almost in a way rising to the challenge. I interpreted all this at the end of like, all right, you've been presented probably the greatest mental challenge is to overcome, what's happened to you in the past. This very traumatic, incident that's, that in a way feels like it's taken from you, this world that you built around. And it wasn't because I wanted to go back and regain, that life, as it was, I wanted to fully understand, my thoughts, in processing all this, and then essentially the fear, which is, one of the single most, paralyzing, emotions in our lives. That fear of not being, you talked about not being good enough, being judged by others, fear of failure, and so I accepted everything that happened. Once I slowed down, I was able to mindfully process it simply as another challenge to further grow and explore my mental capabilities. So I kept riding big waves, trying to, without the expectation that I had to go out there and perform or be the standout of any session, but when it felt good for me. And then I started thinking about going back out to Cortes Bank and what that would be like. And what I would go through mentally out there, it was either going to be, the greatest experience ever, or potentially the worst. But I always knew that there'd be something that would happen out there that would, it would stimulate everything again and bring back, I felt like, the hardest of emotions. But in having the most challenging, the greatest challenges in our life is where we're going to grow from the most. So I was going to go back out there and I was going to face those extreme fears that I had. Put myself in the exact same place that all I had were some pretty traumatic memories of it, and see if I could actually process those in a mindful way and turn them into that same positive motivation that I had riding big waves. The big waves had given me all along, and I was able to do it. That there was a ton of fear. But it's only fear is only a fabrication of our own minds. It's something that I think a lot of people do know. It's something that they know deep inside of them, but being able to actually implement that idea into their everyday life and their actions is a different story. That we create the world around us, in our own minds. The way we perceive things. And fear, it's this stimulus response reaction that, okay, something's coming at me, it's intimidating, it's scary, these big waves, I'm fearful of whatever. You choose how you're going to, process that information coming to you, and, essentially how you're going to react to it. And that's what, makes fear either, something positive or something negative. That, okay, I'm scared of this big wave, I'm going to flee and go for safety because that's what, instinctively, how I want to do this. Or, you can do the opposite. All right, I'm intimidated, I'm scared, but I know I'm ready to do this. I'm confident in myself. I've prepared, and I'm not going to let it affect me because I do know that I'm capable of this. And in that moment, it turns from being something, negative to something, inspiring for me. And I went back out there to Cortes Bank, and that's exactly what it was. The most frightening experience, but so beautiful at the same time, because I was able to turn it back into that, positive motivator and overcome it. And the second that you do that, and you're able to realize that, you can control, all these situations around you, those ones that you're, question if you're good enough, or, if you're afraid of failure, taking that fear and, using it as an inspiration instead of an inhibitor. The world is opened up. A world of opportunity is presented to you like never before.
How would you describe how would you describe the difference in you and your day-to-day life after going back out to Cortes Bank?
It's been, it wasn't that really. It just kind of reaffirmed what I had realized, throughout this year of processing everything. But in general, the whole, event, a few, very key factors is that, it really puts into perspective. It's all put into perspective what really matters in this life.
And say that. I'm sorry, Greg. I'm sorry, that was breaking up there. Could you start that over again, please?
If I were to really kind of sum up everything, a lot of what happened in that session at Cortes Bank, it was just reaffirming what I had learned throughout the course of the year. And, a few key things, that were really put into perspective of what really matters in life. And it's the materialist possessions. It's not, the job titles that we possess. It is our true, happiness that's within us. The beautiful company and friends and family that we have, and so fortunate to be a part of, the opportunity, to love and experience life, and in the same time, experience, failures and the challenging times, because, without them, there's dualities to everything in life. You can't, experience or know what hot is without having cold. We can't, have success or really be able to, I feel like, enjoy it the way that we do without knowing what it feels like to fail.
Mm.
And so everything, it was just building throughout the year, kind of these ideas and knowledge, and just going back out there. And we're speaking on kind of, the topic of fear, that you can't, I feel like, appreciate, that enlightenment or, that experience of overcoming it unless you've, succumbed to it, before as well.
Yeah.
And, but just knowing that, looking at the bigger picture of life, really, and embodying it all, the ups and the downs, has been the greatest, gift for me, and something that this whole, experience has given me the opportunity to really see and feel and learn, or the opportunity to learn about in depth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, and I'm curious, because you've mentioned that this process is still unfolding. You've where you are currently today. What's an insight into a challenge that you're up against today? Right now, I've gone back and I'm surfing big waves again. Still not with the confidence that I, used to have, but it's, slowly coming back, to where I'm enjoying it, having fun again. And, as I spoke earlier, I feel like I've stepped into this world of, new opportunities. And I have my sights set on, a few things that I would like to, create in my life. But I'm still, even knowing, and I talk so diligently about, this concept of fear, I'm still hesitant, on a couple of things to fully just take that dive and move into it, because it's so new and foreign to me, because again, all I'd really built, or, if you ask me anything in the world about riding big waves, I can tell it to you, because that's what,
you know, the
That's your
last 20
thing,
years
yeah.
of my life has been. So, you know, there's still this hesitancy in these other ideas and you know, things I'd like to do that I'm not, you know, fully diving in head first because I'm questioning, you know, and it's hilarious. I laugh at myself all the time, but I guess, you know, that's part of, again, the growth process. And
Well, I'm glad you brought
you
it
know,
up, and I'm glad you brought up the laughter too, because I think that we can get precious about this. The first fallacy is that somehow we've got to get confident and then we can do something, but that doesn't work. and then even if we have a pattern of how we deal with fear, it's like expecting that to go away. And so even though the challenges change, the things that we're doing changes, it sounds like you're able to recognize, well, there I go. I'm doing my thing again. That's my thing I do with fear. And that's not going to go away throughout the rest of your life. So I'm glad that
I mean,
go ahead.
I feel like if it ever did, you know, and you know that you would have reached enlightenment and you know ascended into the heavens, you know that's not, you know, it's always going to be there, and you know, as subtle as it is sometimes, you know that little bit of ego that's you know, going to jump out at you with, you know, whatever, you know, this kind of deconstructive, you know, thoughts or self-ridicule or, you know, questioning of, oh, you can't really do that. You're not good enough. But just being able to acknowledge that that's all that it actually is. And that you don't have to let it, you know, stifle your, you know, creativity or actually moving forward with any of these things. And, you know, I catch myself all the time, you know, even still, and I laugh. And, you know, the key to that, overcoming that is you know, slowing down and again, mindfully, you know, approaching whatever it is, you know, with kind of, you know, rational, you know, thought processes. It's not just that reactive mind of, you know, of the ego, but okay, which, you know, of these emotions is actually, you know, real. And then the same way I approached, you know, my big wave surfing was a very diligent, methodical manner of, you know, assessing the risk versus the reward, and you know what I need to do to you know manage any of the risks, and you know what I need to do to get from you know step A to step B, and is it feasible, and really assessing all of the you know all encompassing you know elements to whatever it is you know you're going to do, you know what I'm looking to do next, and then you know moving forward whatever direction it is, you know actually acting upon you know those ideas.
I love it. You know, acknowledge what's going on. Don't try and bullshit yourself, but then also acknowledge the fear and move forward. You know, and there was the thing in here of like, what's really driving us? Is it that egoic thing? Is it that fear-based, not enough thing? I'm really glad that you didn't get stuck in, okay, big wave surfing sucks for me. I don't big wave surf anymore. It's more about what's driving me. If I'm going to do something, what's the mindset that I'm bringing, or what's the motivation that I'm bringing there? And I think that a lot of us can close off huge aspects of our life because we get stuck on the thing instead of the mindset or the experience that we bring to it. And that's where it gets to get redefined. We get to have a second act in that area. Well, I can do this in a frantic, fearful, defensive place. Well, that's draining. Or maybe I can find the fun. Where's the curiosity? Where's the playfulness? I'm really glad that you touched on that.
It has to, I mean, no matter what you're doing, it has to be, you know, from a place of fun and love and enjoyment. Yeah, that's one thing that I've, you know, learned from all of this, that's, you know, that's what we're here to experience, you know, and if we're, you know, if you start doing things for the wrong reasons, the wrong motivation, it's gonna, you know, you may be able to sustain it for a while, but it's eventually going to catch up to you to where you need to, you know, either change that motivation or, you know, change what you're actually doing, or, you know, find a way of, you know, of encompassing that fun and lightheartedness into whatever, you know, your activity it is. Because, you know, we're here to be happy and love and enjoy this life. And if you're not doing that and you're not surrounded by that, you know, people will bring that into you know, occupation that, you know, provides that to you, or at least, you know, gives you the opportunity to experience that, you know, maybe not necessarily in the workplace, but beyond it, you've missed the point, you know.
Exactly.
Or you know, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I do agree with you. I appreciate you bringing that up. It's so easy to get caught up on achievements and stuff, but as you said, those
The
are
achievements in the end, those are secondary to, to that real happiness that's, comes from inside you. There is, this kind of self-gratification of accomplishing things and whatever else, but it's, it's about the bigger picture and the whole journey in the end. And it has to be based around, love and happiness and, respect and gratitude and appreciation for, where you're at and what you have in your life. If you're basing it upon, solely upon its achievements, that can bring, some sort of gratification, but there's a lot deeper, fulfillment that comes from, those other aspects.
exactly. My coach, we were talking the other day, and I don't know where this quote came from, but he says, we can't get enough of what we don't really need. And, I think of that in terms of so many things like the accomplishments, but also a sense of certainty or security. It's like, I wonder if we really need that much certainty and that much of a false sense of security, because it never seems like it's ever enough. So, especially with the achievements too, it's just that longing, that bottomless pit of desire for those things that we really don't need anyway. So, Greg, I really appreciate you. We've been all over the place today, and you've really opened the kimono, and especially in a sport that can be a lot of in a very subtle way, some chest thumping and big balls out there, and you've really shown true strength, in my opinion, to reveal what's really been going on for you. And so, I'm just excited you were on here to talk about this, about your experience. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again for having me, Tripp. And it's the challenges are never going to stop, and just gotta enjoy them and use those again as the next stepping stones to learn and grow from. So I appreciate you having me on and taking the time and sharing your insight as well.
There's so much more to The New Man than these interviews, so visit thenewmanpodcast.com and join the mailing list so you never miss another update. Thanks for listening.